Hello and welcome to Creating a Human Rights Culture, which aims to promote a lived awareness of the interdependency and indivisibility of human rights principles in our minds, hearts, and bodies, that is, dragged into our everyday lives. What, after all, is freedom of speech to a person who is homeless and lives in a world at war? Therefore, it is dedicated ultimately to the application of the Human Rights Triptych, which in brief consists of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights at its center, the conventions, that is, international treaties on the right, and implementation measures on the left. Hello again, I'm Joseph Franca, and this is part 2 of our show on micro-intrusions. I am here with my colleague, friend of 7 months, Dr. Rhoda Smith.
Yes.
Shake your hand
Very
again.
nice.
Whom I've worked with for 7 months. And we're still friends, and I think we'll be friends for a while.
Yes.
We share a lot of similar ideas and thoughts, and it's a pleasure working with you.
Right.
So let's continue with this notion of micro-intrusion that is obviously related to human rights because we need to treat other people with dignity and relate to them with dignity, not in pejorative ways, not in ways that put them down.
Right.
But the issues are complicated. So last, I was going to say last class, last episode, we spoke about what happened at Starbucks, the African-American men who were being arrested. They were arrested, actually. And well, can we continue with that example for a bit? And then also maybe bring up some other examples that are going on. And then also discuss where this came from, how we're socialized into this, and take it from there. Go for it.
Yeah,
All right.
so last episode, I think when we were ending, I had brought up the Starbucks incident. And so I'm very pleased with the way Starbucks handled the incident, but I'm very aggrieved by the way the police handled it.
Yes, there needs to be a lot more training.
My father, I should start by saying, so that people can know I'm not anti-police.
Yeah, neither am I.
I'm not anti-police. My father was a police officer in Chicago for many years. In fact, when I was little, I was going to be a policewoman because the uniform was cool, the leather jackets were cool, like my dad just looked cool. So I thought, yeah, I'm going to be a policewoman too. And then when I figured out that police officers got shot and beat up and killed on the job, I changed my mind and lo and behold, became a social worker who's kind of sometimes a police officer without the bulletproof vest, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm aggrieved that, coming from a family of police, law enforcement personnel, that it is the police in these situations that seem to have a lack of critical thinking skills. You arrive at the Starbucks and somebody says, we called on them. And them they've called on, they're just sitting there being people. So this is a situation where now we're arrested for being black at Starbucks.
Yes. And
so these guys are putting up no, they're not in any way resisting arrest. They go quietly because I think there has been, part of the socialization that's happening today is if you have a African-American male in your life, you're instructing them to not have conversation, to not resist, don't even ask questions, just go, because that seems to be the best way to stay alive. The police proceeded with the arrest. And so I'm very concerned about a police force that anyone can call. Anyone can call and say, you're doing this. And when the police arrive, you're actually guilty of this before, even when you prove that you are not being whatever this is, you fill in the blank. So I think we have started to talk about the incident that happened recently at a college not far from here. I believe it was Yale, where a young woman
to our viewers about that.
A young woman is working on a paper in the common room of a dorm, becomes fatigued and decides to sleep. An African-American woman. And decides to take a nap. And so the story that I heard was that she was, then awakened by another student who was non-black, who was a white student, who said, "You can't sleep here." And I guess, I don't know if they had words, but the police were subsequently called, and the young woman in, today's world of technology records the interaction, and that recording of the interaction with the police officers was 17 minutes long, which in my book is about 16 and a half minutes too long, given that she had an ID and a key to a dorm room and said, "This is my room, you can check." So my point becomes, is there, this is so pervasive. I mean,
it's
what's your
pervasive.
thought?
It reminds me of Henry Louis Gates. He was the chair of the African American department at Harvard, and he was arrested in his own home. Something's wrong here. It's pervasive. And there was another incident with golf carts or something?
Right. So
what
I
was
don't
that
have a
about?
lot of information about it, but I know that there was some African American women who were golfing, and the offense, I guess, or the thing that became the point of contention, is that they were golfing too slow. So they weren't going quickly enough, and some kind of a, something ensued, an argument or, some kind of confrontation. And I think, again, the police were called. And so, like most young people today, I am also, on social media in a very limited way, not unlike most young people.
Me too.
I'm just on Facebook. So I actually kind of filter my news through Facebook, because otherwise there's too much negativity on the news for me.
Yeah. And people are on the internet now 23 hours a week.
That seems low. 23 hours a week seems low.
That's the whole day almost.
I mean, yeah, true. Yeah. So, and one of the things that I saw was somebody said, "Please, white people, stop calling the police." But I don't think that that's where the problem lies. I don't think that it's in the issue is not that you call the police. I mean, there's this whole see something, say something. So they're seeing something that they are perceiving as threatening or harmful, and so they're saying something. Now, where the critical contact comes in is when the police gets there. If you've been trained to assess a situation, do you feel like you must act on it because a call was made? See, I come from the world of child welfare. As a child welfare social worker, anyone can call. Your neighbor can be feuding with you and say, "Oh, they're mistreating their kids." But when Child Protective Services gets there, if we don't see signs of mistreatment, we don't get stories of mistreatment. When we interview the child, we don't, hear cries of maltreatment, then that was just a call. Nothing's going to go in on you. No record is going to, do you know what I mean?
I know what you mean.
But why aren't police officers who do have guns and batons and tasers, why are they not being trained to think more critically and to be more fully assessing of these situations?
Well, they should be. Like I said last episode, there are some human rights trainings for law enforcement personnel. You just have to Google it. Human rights trainings for law enforcement personnel.
Right.
And I know that they have...
Are they taking them?
I don't think they're doing it in this country. For some reason, our country doesn't... I don't know, they don't really like the UN that much or something, which is another issue. They're seen as third world demagogues, or xenophobia is alive and well in this country. But in other countries like Europe, I do know that they do teach that, in Denmark, for example, and France. And they do have incidences of police brutality, but it tends to be a lot less, maybe because of the training. I'm not really sure, but it's there.
Well, I know you had asked, what can we do? In the last show, you asked, what could we do?
Yeah, what could we do? And also talk about where does this come from?
Okay.
And how could we nip it in the bud? See, as you're talking, my knee-jerk reaction goes back to my Catholic school days when I learned about venial sins and mortal sins. Things have changed these days, but the venial sin had black spots on a bottle, and then a mortal sin had the whole bottle became black or something. So I was sort of socialized into thinking black was bad. As a kid, I was kind of a space kid, and I wasn't a good reader, and they put me in what's called a crow row. They had birds, and the best readers were in the dove row. So the doves were the whites, and the crows, such as I.
So that's symbolism.
I was in, you know, they were black, and somehow I was socialized into thinking, I don't know, black is bad. And when I heard black was beautiful, it was like, come on, you know, and I still have to, I find myself working at it, if you don't mind. I mean, it's just not 100% out of the system.
Sure.
So those are some of my experiences. It just doesn't have to do with black, like I mentioned last episode about 3 blind mice, you know, the way we're socialized. But anyway, so where do you think all this comes from? Do you have any ideas? And then what could we do about it?
Well, I think that it's important. So first, I think something can be done about it. And I think that first thing is that we have to have the conversations. We have to have the conversations in a way that it does not become antagonistic. So I think we all have to begin to think more deeply about one another. If I am you, what is important to you? So that can become important to me, so that we can have our conversation in a way that comes from a place of, you know, is this comfortable for you? So I think we need to keep that dialogue on in the forefront, right? So I don't want to see a world where we're all tiptoeing around each other, where we're afraid to bump into each other. In fact, I say to social workers quite often, you are going to mess up when it comes to being culturally humble and sensitive. You're going to misstep. And so I would suggest that you practice sincere apology, because I think it's important that if I have offended you in any way, I can offer you an apology about that, and we can continue our relationship, as opposed to that offense cutting off that relationship. Because I think that when we can be in relationship with one another, that's how we grow. I was once doing a multicultural training for social workers with a colleague, and this training format is often 2 people who are different in some way. So it can be 2 women, but they need to be different ethnicities, cultures, or races. It can be a man and a woman, so that all of those, you know, different aspects of difference can come up. And so as I'm doing the training, I'm saying the same kind of speech to social workers, you know, make sure you don't say that, because the whole conversation might go south. And my co-trainer stops me. She said, hold on, I'm from Tennessee. What does that mean? It's gonna go south. Do you see what I mean?
Oh, I see.
And so here's an expression I had used many times, never thinking that would be construed as offensive.
Right.
So that's an example of a microaggression in the form of a micro insult or invalidation. But because I had never been aware of that, I had no bells went off in my head when I formulated that statement. But once she said that, now I'm very careful that I don't say that.
Right. The same issue could be, when I was a teen, we used to say, oh, that's so gay.
Yes.
And
I grew up with that as well.
Said it a lot. I
Right.
stopped catching myself. Now you just don't say it. I mean, it's offensive.
Right.
And we have to work on it.
Right.
There's all kinds of situations like that.
Exactly. And so where are the lines? Like people don't walk around with signs saying, I'm this, I'm that. Make sure you don't offend any of that.
Yeah.
And so that's why I'm saying I think we need to be more, start thinking more deeply about one another. And when we do mess up, and we will, to be able to offer a sincere apology that, are we able to move on? There's many times that as a social worker...
But I have to interrupt. A sincere
Go right
apology
ahead.
with the creative dialogue.
Yes.
that you want to keep on talking about this.
Tell
So
me
you're-
why it was offensive. Help me understand what that looked like from your...
What could I do so
Right.
it doesn't happen again?
Exactly. Because there's been times that things have happened to me when I'm sure, okay, if I was male, you know, that would not have been treated like that. Or if I was
Oh, yeah.
not black, or if I was not heavy, or if I, do you know what I mean? So there are all of those things. Those are my sensitivities. The person may not have had a negative intent toward me, but the effect, right, is the effect, I think, can be moderated by sensitivity and intent.
Right. Well, I've had, as Friedrich Nietzsche used to say, the philosopher, we're masters at self-deception.
Yes.
So we don't realize that we're hurting people, but but we are.
And you brought up a very good, and not to interrupt you, but you brought up a very good point about where does this come from, this black and white symbolism, right? So there's symbolism that is very, 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 very early. I think even definitely pre-slavery, where, you know, the angel is always dressed in
White.
right, and the bad guy's always dressed in
Devils are black, right?
right, and there's a little white lie, and that lie is not so bad, right?
Right.
So it's ingrained at every level of society. I don't think we can undo all of these things at once,
Right,
but
you're
I
blackballed.
think yes, yes,
All sorts of things.
yes. So the dialogue, continuing the dialogue is important. And I think that's one of the things that we do at the School of Social Work is to practice. So I teach practice classes. And so to practice, how can I say this in a way that's not offensive? I even talk to my students about taking the languaging of the words right and wrong out of their vocabulary. Because if you go to your client with the, you're doing this wrong and the right way, that kind of a, demarcation can serve to make people defensive, make them feel bad, to blame them or shame them for something that may not be their fault.
Right. Sounds great. Well,
So-
keep on talking. I could
Yeah,
bring
I was
up
going
all
to say, I
kinds of
know we could
things.
talk about this for
Okay,
hours.
well, let's keep
have.
on doing it.
We have, yes.
There are also where people internalize micro-intrusions.
Yes.
David Chappelle, for example, who Maya Angelou was a brilliant person. She said David Chappelle was a profound thinker. I know he's got his problems, but he is sort of a genius in some ways. And he talked about how he was prejudiced against himself because he had problems playing. He's an African American, for those who don't know. He had problems playing Santa Claus. He didn't want the kids to think that the presents were going to be late. You know, he's a comedian, okay?
Okay, I
but
see
my
what you're
feeling
saying.
is that
Right.
we tend to internalize
Right.
what's out there inside, and we sort of microaggress, if that's the word, micro-intrude against ourselves. I myself, I grew up in a very blue-collar Italian family. There's nothing wrong about being blue-collar Italian family. That's fine. But sometimes I wonder, what am I doing? Writing books and going to the UN and being a professor. Again, there's nothing wrong with being blue-collar Italian. In fact, I'm actually very proud of it. But you start feeling, I don't know, like an imposter or something, or it's the way you're socialized.
Right.
And I just have to bring up another example. As some viewers know, I play the accordion.
Oh,
okay?
nice.
Yeah, I do. Okay, I'll play it for you one day. And I play the accordion, and I grew up in an Italian-Polish family, and I used to play Bach, Beethoven, Rossini, Chopin, concert accordion. When I came out of the Italian-Polish milieu, people found out I play accordion. They said, well, where's your monkey? They talk like that to me.
Right.
And it was very insulting. And it was sort of like, well, I could play Bach and Beethoven, because the accordion actually is a very ethnic instrument. It's also a class instrument, because poor people did not have I don't know, money to get a piano or a house or something, so they had a portable instrument. Okay, so it was sort of kind of ethnic bashing, if not class bashing. So that's just one example. We're talking a lot about race, but I wanted to share some micro-intrusions around ethnicity or class or whatever. So I'm just sharing.
Well, and I was going to say, in response to your story, see, for me, there's a place where you became sensitive to the question. Okay. Because perhaps this is someone who's only ever seen an accordion and a monkey together.
Exactly.
And so they don't mean to say that you should have a monkey. They're saying, in my mind, people who play the accordions usually have a monkey. This is kind of reminds me of a situation I talked to students about last term, where on a college campus that was what is traditionally a predominantly white university, the president of the university sought to try to make all of the different ethnic groups feel important and included on campus. And so his executive team, I guess, came up with this idea, let's have a dinner for each of the ethnic groups. So they had a dinner for the Asian students, and they served Asian cuisine and, you know, decorated with Asian kind of decorations, Asian themed decorations. They had a Latino dinner, and they did the same in terms of the fare and the decorations. When they got to the African American students, they served what they considered a traditional soul food meal, and they had centerpieces on the table that had cotton, the unpicked kind, the stalks of cotton in a vase as the centerpieces. The students became offended by that. And when the president came over and said, how's it going, you know, to groups of students, you know, the students said, what's with the cotton on the table? And the president proceeded to say, well, we're all wearing it. And, you know, just tried to make a joke and walked away. Well, the students were incensed by this. And to make matters worse, a shock jock got news of this happening, and he goes on the radio and says these ungrateful little African American students who did not appreciate blah, blah, blah. So my point becomes, there was a microaggression. Right. The sensitivity of the students. Their response is then highlighted in a way to make them feel bad. Like you shouldn't have feelings about that. I think that they should have feelings about it. I just don't know what those feelings were. I think the bigger issue is, what is the vision and understanding of the people who would plan that? Right. These students are away at college, and so this was I think the president had a very good idea to say, I want to make sure every group on this campus feels included. But I think that somewhere in the planning, it goes awry, and when the wrong thing happens, instead of making apology, then people became defended. So, I mean, what's your take on something like that? Do you know what I'm saying? Do you see how that goes in with your story around, this is my understanding of how this exists on Earth. And so I'm trying to understand how you are here without the accordion and the monkey, like you're missing something, right? Right. And so to lash back, right, and say, you stupid idiot, like right, kids, right, kid, you know, kids, you stupid idiot, right, is not the way to resolve it. Exactly. Okay, you know, where did you come up with this? And right, that'd be another question. So you asked me about a monkey. What would make you think that I should have a monkey with this? Like, really to try to get that person's take on, you know, why they're asking this question. To get their perspective. Yes. Which is the essence of qualitative research. Exactly. And as a general rule, my feeling is people don't get perspectives right. of the people that are most affected by a policy. To talk about something else, I'm thinking of children, for example. How many kids are on welfare? 17 million? I don't know exactly. But do we ever have a major study on children's viewpoints
as to what social welfare should look like, how they can be helped. There aren't many of them, I'll tell you.
I
The
think that's
Children's
another
Defense
show.
Fund
I think that's
has
another
something.
show.
That's another
Yeah.
show. I just
Yeah.
want to say I've done a lot of traveling.
Yes.
And this is not only the United States where we have this problem. I was, for example, at a major conference on the Roma. Again, you don't say gypsies anymore. It was
Okay.
in Prague. And I remember all, to be very honest, white professors, privileged, they'd all talk about this and that. They had the answers to everything. Now, maybe I'm not being politically correct. And as soon as the Roma spoke, they interrupted him. And they interrupted the next one. So I went up to him and I said, hey, you've got the same issue we got here. Because African Americans, I feel, are often interrupted. And I myself have to constantly watch it. We all do. So we have about 1 minute left. I'm wondering if you could come up with anything profound or not profound, or just any concluding comments as to what we should do, and anything else you'd like to add. It's such a pleasure to have you. You have such
it's been
a
very
gentle,
nice to be here.
gentle way about you. And,
Thank you, Joe. I appreciate
I
that.
can see why you get all these likes on our Facebook page.
Well, I was going to say, I think that, again, I'm going to go back to saying I think we need to begin to think more deeply about one another, to understand that we're going to mess up, and
Yes.
figure out how to apologize. Because I think that once a slight has been made, an apology can go so far. It goes back to the old thing that we were taught, which is apologizing can make it better. Right. It might not resolve it, but it can make it better. And I think that we have to continue the dialogue. We can't let it stop at the slight.
You remind me of Desmond Tutu, a Nobel Prize winner, who said the greatest words in the English language are, I'm sorry.
Yes. Yes, that's great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, everyone. So take care. And thank you, Dr. Rhoda Smith.
All right. Thank you for having me.
Take care of yourself.
It's been a pleasure.
Take care of others as needs be.